So my contribution will explore the extraordinary possibilities of ethical AI, which actually correlate seamlessly with my own journey in AI and the challenges we see and we face in the criminal justice system because of the deployment of algorithms. So as a criminologist, my work examines algorithmic decision-making systems in policing, sentencing, and corrections. But before I tell you about the extraordinary possibilities of ethical AI, I want to tell you a story about algorithms that are not accountable, not transparent, and not explainable, and not auditable, and how these algorithms undermine the extraordinary possibilities of ethical AI. So in criminal justice, we have seen the dangers of AI, from wrongful arrest by algorithms to arraignment by algorithms, algorithms rewriting justice and the ways in which justice is administered, the outsourcing of criminal justice decisions to opaque algorithms and zombie algorithms that overpredict risk and recidivism and frustrate due process and systematically overestimate risks when it pertains to Black and brown data, and the continuation of a system that color codes data, particularly in the United States. So what we have seen are algorithms that have been disproportionately unfair and racially biased against Black and brown defendants because of the lack of diversity and equity and inclusion in the design, development, and deployment of these algorithms, algorithms that codify unconscious bias and systemic racism, algorithmic decision-making systems that have really been designed without the kind of vigilance to understand that there are proxies for race that have become data points for risks, such as criminogenic factors, which are not criminal factors or which are not aspects of criminality, but criminogenic, meaning social conditions like structural poverty and unemployment that have sadly become part of the data used to build the models to assess risk in the criminal justice system. So I share all of this with you simply to say that as a criminologist, I have seen when AI gets it wrong. So this is one of the reasons I want to ensure that AI gets it right, using an ethical framework, because we have seen how destructive AI can be and algorithms could be, and how in the blink of an eye in the criminal justice system, an algorithm that makes a false prediction can change the trajectory of someone's life and create a history of intergenerational trauma for families who are now in contact with the criminal justice system because of an algorithm. And we've also seen algorithms denying liberty and, of course, impacting lives and livelihoods. So in criminal justice, in public benefits, in healthcare, in finance, in education, in hiring, advertising, and politics, we've seen those disinformation campaigns built on really deceptive algorithms, and we have seen the dangerous possibilities of AI that lacked a framework of accountability and transparency and auditability, explainability, and understandability. So that's the AI we can trust. So how do we build the AI we can trust? So it's really critical for us, no matter where we stand, no matter where we stand in the AI life cycle, to take a leadership role and ensure an ethical approach to the design, development, and deployment of AI, to ensure we stretch the imagination of AI, as well as the diverse, inclusive, and equitable approach to AI that fosters an environment of inclusion. So to experience the extraordinary possibilities of AI, we must be courageous as individuals who work in the industry to ensure that in our work, we amplify diverse voices and bring visibility to unrepresented or as well as underrepresented groups through collective intelligence, and an intelligence that embraces diverse intelligences as well, something that is compassionate and something that is empathetic and something that understands the diversity of the space in which we populate, call Earth. So it is incumbent on us to promote an ethical organizational culture and ethical design design of AI that supports diversity, equity, and inclusion, and not the ethics washing or the window dressing with ethics that we have already seen, or ethical theater, where many of our big tech companies have been some of the greatest actors on a stage that does not support an ethical approach to AI. So we've got to bring a real-time strategy to stretch the imagination of AI for us to truly enjoy these extraordinary possibilities of ethical AI. So to experience those possibilities, we must be bold, and we must ask ourselves some tough questions, and we must be prepared for the answers. So in this inclusive forum, I will take the liberty to ask you some of those questions. Why does diversity intimidate? Why does inclusion generate fear and often hostility? Why does equity make some of us territorial and tribal? Why are so many companies still struggling to get diversity, equity, and inclusion right? Why are we as a collective so afraid to make space at the table and offer a seat to someone who does not look like us? How committed are we to a multicultural perspective of AI? And why not more interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary collaborations in AI? So as an AI ethicist and a data activist, I confront some of the most unimaginative and deeply rooted reductionist thinking and attitudes when it comes to AI, such as bias, discrimination, systemic racism, that continue to be normalized and legitimized in algorithms, that continue to deliver devastating, if not deadly outcomes to marginalized and vulnerable groups. So to experience these extraordinary possibilities of ethical AI, we must think of creative ways to extricate AI from those subtle, insidious, and pervasive biases that continue to undermine the imagination of AI. So we must confront a painful past of that is encoded in our data. So we must look at the punitive use of data to historically punish marginalized groups, some of the adverse data experiences of vulnerable communities. We must take those into consideration, and the misleading narratives encoded in algorithms and default discrimination baked into data. So if we truly are interested in the extraordinary possibilities of AI, we have got to be bold enough to challenge the data power structure. And we've got to reimagine how data is classified, the annotation, interpretation of data, the quality of data. We've got to really deconstruct the ecology of inequality in data, those data disparities, the social structure of data collection, the power and privilege inherent in the data collection process, and the political underpinnings of data. So to truly experience the extraordinary possibilities of ethical AI, we must be courageous enough to really decode the etiology of data discrimination, which continues to undermine the imagination of AI. So we have got to look at the backstories, the historic, systemic, and institutional discrimination built into widespread biases that persist in society, those pre-existing patterns of exclusion and inequality that continue to create disparate impacts of data on marginalized and vulnerable communities. So to experience those extraordinary possibilities and to build the AI that we can trust, we have got to disrupt the social determinants of data. We've got to disband the idea of the neutrality of science and the fallacy of raw data and promote representation, amplification, and visibility of marginalized and vulnerable groups. And we have got to dismantle that data power structure and really rethink and reimagine the design, definitions, designations, distinctions that we attach to data. We've got to dissect that data system and really drill into the impacts, the long-term impacts of data on society, data that's built in a social, economic, and political system. So for us to really and truly explore and engage and benefit from the extraordinary potential of AI, we must co-design an ethical future by building the requisite consciousness and applying the due diligence and embracing or fostering or engendering a space of eternal vigilance to ensure that we expose the hidden effects of algorithms, the racial, economic, educational disparities of algorithms, the marginalization and poly-victimization created in society with these algorithms that we are using. So to really experience the ethical imagination of AI, we must erect robust and rigorous ethical guardrails that protect our privacy and respect our data rights and data sovereignty. And we have got to ensure as well that these ethical guardrails are dynamic and vibrant and are built into a rights-based approach to AI. We've got to audit the AI systems in place. We've got to interrogate those algorithms. We've got to work to reduce the disparities we are seeing that are being caused by algorithms. We've got to create those protections against bias and unfairness, and we have got to prevent the perpetuation of human and societal biases. We've got to be bold enough and brave enough to engage diverse and inclusive research approaches, interventions, engage diverse and inclusive practices, policies, and people, expand the range of what we consider experts, and ensure that stakeholders are involved in the design, development, and deployment processes. We have got to stretch the imagination of ethical AI through the marriage of ethics and innovation. Ethics does not stifle innovation, it actually enhances innovation. So to experience the extraordinary possibilities of ethical AI, we must design, develop, and deploy AI that we can trust, AI that we understand, AI that is accountable, transparent, explainable, auditable, responsible, principled AI. And if we are truly to experience the extraordinary possibilities of ethical AI, then we must welcome each other into the future of AI and ensure all histories are part of the legacy of AI. I thank you very much.